We are now on Daf Lamed Gimel, Amud Aleph, and we're up to Omar Mar, which is approximately 1/3 down from the top of the Amud, midway between Tosas Divra Maskal Michlal and Afilu. The first word in the line is Oleh. Omar Mar. We had quoted Abaye, who set up the Seder Maracha of the Avodah of the Beis HaMikdash. And Abaye said, Maracha Gedola Kodemes LeMaracha Shniya Shel Torres. And they had to bring this block of wood, which is called the Maracha Gedola, which was in a certain sense a cavalry of sorts. In other words, when they would run out of logs, they would use this Maracha. And that had to be set up and organized before they got to the lighting the fire for the Torahs. Minolan, what is the source, the basis in the Torah to derive this sequence? The Sanya we learned in a Brisa, the Pasuk says in Vayikra Perek Vav, Hi ha'olah al mokdah al mizbeach kol halayla. So let's understand the word mokdah. Mokdah means the fire itself. And it's got to be on the mizbeach going, this fire has to be going constantly throughout the night. And mokdah zu maracha gedola. And then it says, in the next part of the same pasuk, the eish hamizbeach tukad bo. And now we have another tukad. So we had mokdah in the Reisha, and that was ola kol halayla. And now we have eish hamizbeach tukad bo, and the word tukad again refers to some maracha and some bundle of eitzim, and zu maracha shniya shel ktores. And the second bundle of eitzim is going to be used to burn and create the coals upon which we will burn the ktores. Now, the two words are almost identical. The first word is mokdah, and the second is tukad. Mokdah is a noun, and tukad is a verb. And Rashi says that both of these words indicate maduras eitzim, an entire block of wood. This pasuk is coming to teach us that the maracha shniya, from which they took the coals to burn the ktores on the inner mizbeach, the mizbeach hapnimi, would take place in the mizbeach hachitzon. In other words, they burnt the eitzim to create gecholim. All this took place in the mizbeach hachitzon, even though the actual aktar of the ktoros would take place in the mizbeach hapnimi. So basically, what Rashi is doing for us is, I think he's giving us some sort of rationale as to why this sequence was chosen by the Torah. We need the maracha rishona on the mizbeach hachitzon to be taken care of before we're ready for the ktoros, because even though you might argue, well, the ktoros is in the echal, that's we're going to burn it on the mizbach hazav, and why shouldn't that get precedence? But the answer is because in order to set up gecholim, coals which will be taken into the echal to be burnt on the mizbech hapnimi, we have to create those coals, and the Torah requires creating those coals on the mizbech ha'olah, on the outer Mizbeach. So first, obviously, you're going to create those coals, and that's going to be considered Hi ha'ola al mokdal Mizbeach. And then, after you've created through this maracha coals from the burnt wood on the Mizbach HaChitzon, now you can take those coals into the Heichal and burn the Ketores. Says the Gemara of the Epoch Hana, although you have the word Mokda and Tukadbo twice, but you know what? Maybe we should set up the Marocha Shniya before we get to the Marocha Gedola. Marocha Shniya meaning on the smaller Mizbeach, maybe that should get precedence. So more answers, Mistavra Shemarocha Gedola Adifa Shekain Kaparasa Meruba. The Gemara now introduces a whole new element into the equation. And that is that there are many karbanos that have to be brought on the Mizbeach. And they each generate another kapara. How many kaparos are you going to generate in the Mizbeach HaPnimi? Just one, just the Ketores. So therefore, the Mizbeach HaChitzon, which intuitively we would have identified as the lower end of Kedusha vis-a-vis the Mizbeach HaPnimi, has a certain significance to it that gives it first rights. And that is Rov Kaparas Aleh, that most of the Karbanos are brought on the Mizbeach HaChitzon. Is Mistabra Mocher Gdola Adifa Shekain Kaparasa Meruba. Now, what is the emphasis here on Kaparasa Meruba? L'chora, the proper language, the more accurate terminology would have been Shekain Takruvasa Meruba, meaning the volume of karbanos that are being sacrificed on this Mizbeach is greater than the volume on the Mizbeach HaPnimi. What's the emphasis here on Kaparasa Meruba? The Ritva writes that tikroves, meaning bringing the carbon, is called in the language of Shas Kaparasa. So Kaparasa Meruba is identical, says the Ritva, with Takrovasa Meruba. Just two different words, but they mean exactly the same thing. That's the Ritva. Now comes Tosfos. Tosfos says that the meaning of the word kapara in this context is the olas hatamid. The tamid is mechaperes al ese v'alosase shenitak lies. Tosfos is saying that the choice of language here, kaparasa meruba, is very deliberate. How many kaparas do you achieve through the carbon tamid? Well, the carbon tamid is a carbon ola. And an ola has the power to be mechaper both on essays and even on a lav hanitak lias. So many different violations will be covered by the kapara of the Tamid. Mashen came, when you talk about Ketores, Gemara is going to tell us that the Ketores is mechaper on the Aveira of Lashon Hara. So you limit it and you whittle it down to one single Aveira. Again, it's a very severe Aveira, Lashon Hara, but it's one Aveira. On the other side of the scale, when you bring the Tamid, you're talking about Mitzvah Saseh, talking about Lo Saseh Shenitak Leseh. So Tosas is more loyal and more dedicated to the language, the choice of language here of Gemara. And that is kaparasa meruba. We have many different sins that are covered by the carbon tamid. So therefore, it makes more sense that the Maracha Gedola should come first than the Ketores, because the Ketores doesn't have that element of kaparasa meruba. Fact, the Gemara, Adarab, on the contrary, Maracha Shnia Adifa, Shekain Machnisim Imeno Gecholen. What do we do on the Maracha Shnia with the second round of logs that are going to be burnt on the Mizbeach? We're going to create, with that Maracha Shnia, Gecholen. I mean, you and I might say, I'm not impressed. But I am impressed because these gecholim will be taken lifnai the lifnim. Not, don't take me literally because that's only on Yom Kippur, but the rest of the year they're taken into the heichal to the mizbeach hapnimi, and that's where we're going to burn the ketores. So it's very interesting. The Gemara is weighing on the scale the avodas hakarbanos on the Mizbeach hachitzoni in comparison to the ketores on the Mizbeach hapnim. So first of all, the Gemara says that which is intuitively correct. The Mizbeach Hachitzon has the advantage of Kaparasa Meruba, whereas the Ketores is only Mechaper on one Avera. But now the Gemara says, wait a minute, let's look at the total picture. Are you telling me that I should be convinced that the Ketores is inferior to all the myriad of Karbanos and the kaparos that are achieved through the Mizbeach HaChitzon? I'm going to show you that there's one dimension of the Ketores that puts it into a separate category. And its status is greater than that of all the avodas on the Mizbeach HaChitzon. And that is that it is lifnim. It's an avodas HaKetores that's done in the Heichal, which upgrades Ketores to a whole new level. You'll ask me, but we're talking about the Maracha. The Eitzei Maracha brought on the Mizbeach HaChitzon, yes. But the Eitzei Maracha on the Mizbeach HaChitzon are going to create the Gecholim, the coals, which we're going to take into the Heichal in order to burn the Ketores. So therefore, the Maracha Shniya Shal Ketores has a certain superior status vis-a-vis the Maracha Rishona, the Maracha Gedol. When it says Afilu Hochi Kaparasa Meruba Adif. If you'll ask me to compare and contrast, to weigh the pluses and the negatives of Kaparasa Meruba versus the Gecholim that are Machnisim Bifnim into the Eichal, I would say that the Kapara Meruba is a much more impressive achievement, and that's the Maracha Rishona, than the Ketores than preparing the Gecholim for the Ketores, even though it doesn't have that element of Kapara Merub. So yes, we will take the Marocha Shnia, create Gecholim, and bring these Gecholim inside. And in that sense, the Marocha Shnia is the kingpin. But Kapara Meruba is more important. It has a greater weight. I'm tempted to think that the Gemara is vacillating between two polar extremes. Is it, meaning the Seder Adifus is Chashivus is inherent in the carbon, or is it the impact on the person or the people who are on behalf of whom the carbon is being brought? If you compare Ketores to all the many myriads of avoda in the Mizbeach HaChitzon, you could arguably claim that the Ketores is superior to all the other avodas. And Araya, that it's the only avoda, the only Ketore that's done on the Mizbeach HaZav. But from a perspective of kapara, of what do the people of Israel take away with them as a result of the avoda, here the Marocha Rishona, the avodas chutz, is certainly a greater achievement than the Torahs, which we said was mechaper on Lashon Hara. Ibay Seima, the Gemara offers another possible reconciliation and justification for the Akadama, why we're maked in the Marocha Gedola, the Ilo Mishkach Eitzim, the Marocha Shnia, Milo Ma'ayel Mi Marocha Gedola. We said the following, that the Marocha Gedola is a kind of cavalry. I use that term, if you know what I mean. Meaning an event that we run out of logs, we will burn the Marocha Gedola logs, and what that would mean as far as the Ketores is concerned, that in an event we used up all the supply of logs on the Mizbeach, and we're talking about the Mizbeach HaChitzon, we're left without any fuel to create the gecholim that we absolutely need in order to be maktir the Ketores, then we're in deep trouble unless we rely back on the Marocha Gedola. The Marocha Gedola is going to be our salvation, because in order to be maktir the Ketores, we need gecholim. The gecholim have to be produced on the Mizbeach HaChitzon, but there are no logs left to burn the fuel for the Mizbeach HaChitzon and create from those logs the gecholim that are necessary for the Torah of the Ketores. So for that reason, we must absolutely guarantee the Marocha Gedola. I mean, guarantee that we'll be able to create gecholim, and we can only do that through the Marocha Gedola. So in a sense, the Ketores is standing on the shoulders of the Marocha Gedola, because in an event that we don't have the ability to create gecholim from the fuel, from the volume of logs that we have at our disposal, we will therefore undermine completely the avodah of the Ketores. And the only way of salvaging it is through the Marocha Gedola. So Marocha Gedola, in its capacity as protecting the Ketores under all circumstances, that even if an unusual extreme case comes to be where there's no possibility of burning the eitzim for the ketores, for the gecholim for the ketores, then we're going to use and we'll fall back on the marocha gedol. And here I think the Gemara is vacillating between two polar extremes of normalcy and extremity, and extremity. Meaning, if you talk about normal avoda in the Mikdash, we don't need the Marocha Gedola. We have enough logs to produce the gecholim that are necessary for the Aktoris HaKtoris. But if you want to protect yourself for all conditions, you need an insurance policy. The Marocha Gedola is your only insurance policy in event that you ran out of fuel to create the gecholim for the Aktoris HaKtoris. Now Abai says, Marocha Shniya Shal Ktores Kodemes L'Sidur Shnei Gizrei Eitzim. They add on to the Marocha Gedola 2 Gizrei Eitzim. But first, we need a Marocha Shniya Shel Ktores Minolon. From whence does Abaye derive this halacha? In other words, let's find the source for this halacha being makdim the Marocha the Ktores before Sidur Shnei Gizrei Eitzim. So the Gemara derives it from the pasuk Bir Oleha HaKohen Eitzim Baboker Baboker, which means that the Kohen has to add Shnei Gizrei Eitzim onto the Marocha Gedola. Eitzim in this pasuk Bir Oleha HaKohen Eitzim is B'lashon Rabim, and Miyut Rabim is Shnayim. We always have to have a minimum of 2, and it says Oleha, which means on the Marocha Gedola, we will place the Shnei Gizrei Eitzim. V'lo al Chaverta. It's not on the second Marocha of the Ketores. And from the fact that the Torah in this pasuk had to exclude that we shouldn't place the Gizrei Eitzim on the Marocha Shniya, is Michlal, we can derive from that the Isa Lechaverta. That this halacha is derived from the fact that we set up the Gizrei Eitzim on the Marocha Gedola, and Kvar Isa Lechaverta, the Marocha Shniya is already there. So you have the Marocha Rishona, you have the Marocha Shniya, now we're ready for the Shnei Gizrei Eitzim. So Gemara immediately objects, V'hai olea mi boile legufe. How do you use this word olea as an indication that you need both the Marocha Gedola and the Marocha Shel Ketores, Marocha Shniya, and only then do you bring the Shnei Gizrei Eitzim? We need it legufe. And legufe here means that he needs to organize the Eitzim on the Marocha and Dafka on the Marocha. Not on the side, not on its own in some independent way. It's got to be on the Marocha. So the Gemara is now asking, since this word aleo is coming to teach me legufe, that we need to set up the eitzim on the marocha, aleha, we're not allowed to pile it up on this side, on that side, set up a separate storage place. So therefore, we don't have the pasuk left free to teach me that the Marocha Shniya has to come before the Gizrei Eitzim, the Shnei Gizrei Eitzim. The Gemara answers Trei Oleh. Twice in the pasuk it says Oleh. It says Ubir Oleh HaKohen Eitzim Baboker Baboker, and then it says V'orach Oleh HaOlah. So I'm going to use one word Oleh to teach me Legufo, that the logs have to be piled up one on top of the other on the Marocha. And another pasuk of Oleo to teach me that Marocha Shniya kodemes l'shnei gizrei eitzim. Now Abai says Sidur Shnei Gizrei Eitzim Kodem L'Dishin HaMizbeach HaPnimi. So the Gemara explains that Afal Gav the Hacha here in the case of Shnei Gizrei Eitzim Ksiv Baboker Baboker. Ve'Hacha here in the case of Dishun Mizbeach HaPnimi it says Ksiv Baboker Baboker. So we don't know which of these two comes first. Shnei Gizrei Eitzim or Dishun HaMizbeach. Because both in Gizrei Eitzim and in Dishun HaMizbeach we find the words Baboker Baboker. Where it says Afilu Hachi Machshir Odif. Once again, we're comparing different dimensions of the Avodah in the Mikdash. And we're trying to weigh them and see which cat's first dibs, which is more significant. The Gemara says there's no question that Sidur Eitzim is more important than Dishun HaMizbeach. Why? Because what we're talking about is a machshir. A machshir, in the case of Trumas Hadeshin, there's no machshir. The Trumas Hadeshin is not a preliminary to any other avodah. But in the case of the Marocha, we're talking about Shnei Gizrei Eitzim as a machshir. Why? Because that's a machshir of the Torahs. We're going to produce Gecholim, and from these Gecholim, we're going to be maktir inside the Heichal, the Torahs. So if that be the case, you would say that certainly Seder Eitzim should come in front of Dishun. So the Gemara says, Machshir Ma'niru. What do you mean by Machshir? Shnei Gizrei Eitzim? You classify Gizrei Eitzim as a Machshir? Va'amrit, we said before, Shnei Gizrei Eitzim l'marocha gedola. These logs of the Shnei Gizrei Eitzim are designated on the Marocha Gedola for the Karbonos. As far as the Ktoris is concerned, to take the Gecholim, we're going to take them from the Marocha Shniya. Rabbi Yirmiyah answers, Shum Eitzim. You're right. The Shnei Gizrei Eitzim would not serve the Ktoris because we needed the Ktoris to be coming from a different set of logs. But nevertheless, Shum Eitzim. When we talk about Eitzim in a generic sense, whether it be this Marocha of Eitzim or that Marocha, it's always going to be a Hechsher to be Machshir the Ktoris. If we look at Eitzim as a generic category, then it also includes those Eitzim that are Machshir the Ktoris, which is the Marocha Shniya. And therefore the Seder Eitzim, which in this case means Marocha Shniya, comes before Dishun HaMizbeach, because Dishun HaMizbeach is not a Machshir. Now the Gemara offers another answer. Ravina Omar, Hoil v'Hiskil b'Marocha. In other words, you already set up the Marocha Gedola, now you're up to the Marocha Shniya. And that's going to complete the Avodah in the Eitzim. So therefore, when we set up the Shnei Gizrei Eitzim, that has to come before the Dishun. Rav Ashi Omar, Ilo Mishkach Eitzim LaMarocha Shniya, Milo Ma'ayil MiMarocha Gedola. Again, as we said before, we need some sort of a fallback position. In this case, although I agree with you that Shnei Gizrei Eitzim will come first because of Machshirim. But when you ask me, but the Torah was taken from Gecholim, from the Marocha Shnia, whereas the Gizrei Eitzim was set up on the Marocha Gedola, the answer is that if we don't find Eitzim for the Marocha Shnia, then for sure we're going to take the Gecholim from the Marocha Gedola. So we see clearly that Shnei Gizrei Eitzim are a machshir for the Ketores. So here's where we're going to stop, right here at the next statement in Abaye, in which Dishan Mizbeach HaPnimi comes before Hatovas HaNeros. So we'll make a note of where we got up to. So let me take this opportunity to wish everyone a great day, and Amir Hashem will continue tomorrow.